Today we're going to talk about using NSX for application continuity. And because there's so much going on at VMworld, schedules always can never be perfect. It's always a little funny. There's actually an introductory session on this exact topic after this, I think at 4 o'clock. So if you want to learn more about what some of the concepts are, I mean, we're obviously going to kind of go through it here and talk about how it's being put into practice. But if you're looking for more of a baseline, we are going to have a session on that at 4 o'clock. And we'll also point to some more technical deep dives. But for this panel, I'm really excited to have 3 NSX customers who are using NSX for this purpose. And I guess I'll just give a very brief intro to what we mean by application continuity. We see customers use NSX for a number of reasons. It's really, bringing software into bringing networking and security into software in a virtualized platform with use cases in security, automation, and then application continuity, what we're going to focus on today. But of course, they're not mutually exclusive. So for application continuity, we're really talking about bringing that networking and security anywhere. If we have multiple sites, if we're looking to bring our applications into the cloud, how can I have a single point where I can configure consistent networking and security policies that will apply regardless of where my apps are going to go? So that's kind of the premise of what we're talking about. And some projects that may relate to that are disaster recovery, having my apps ready with that security policy and those networking services in place in the backup site should something go wrong. Using multiple sites in a more active mode for data center migration and consolidation planning. And then finally, anything that maybe relates to cloud. And so without further ado, I'll introduce our panel. So first from RGRD law firm, we have Morgan Jones. We have from UNH, University of New Hampshire, Matt Connors. And from Exponent, we have Misha Vimensky. So actually, it's a pretty good variety of folks. So we have, East Coast, West Coast, Texas, right, from the South. And actually, to you and to anybody else who may be coming from the South, I'll echo Pat's statements encouraging folks to donate and hope everything's working out all right for anybody who may have loved ones in the Houston and Louisiana area. But coming back to this, I guess I'll just start. So this is a very brief intro, but I'll let you guys each kind of give yourself a bit more color on what your organization is doing and maybe what each of your roles are within that organization, and then we'll bring it back and talk a bit more about NSX.
All right, so my name is Morgan Jones from Robbins, Geller, Rubman & Dowd out of San Diego. We're a plaintiff's law firm that primarily deals in class action litigation. So we deal with very large cases. If you think back to things like Enron back in the day, we take on things like that. What that means for us, if any of you have ever worked with attorneys, they're probably some of the least tolerant people that you've ever met to being told they can't work at any time that they want to. So it's a pretty big challenge to us to figure out how we can keep their systems always on and how we can move stuff around. The challenge for downtime to do basic maintenance is ever present. So we're looking at ways that we can not only speed up a DR action between our 2 primary data centers in between San Diego and Phoenix, but also to use what we like to call disaster avoidance, right? So we have offices in Florida and Atlanta and Melville, which also are at risk for things like hurricanes, and we frequently have to, before something bad happens, move a workload over. Well, that's disruptive anytime we do that because we have to wait for DNS and all these other things. So we're hoping to finish this project up and use NSX to not have to wait for things like re-IPing to happen, and we can move workloads with a very, very minimal or no downtime according to what the users can see.
Totally.
My name is Matt Connors. I work for the Enterprise Collaboration Messaging team at the University of New Hampshire. Primarily responsible for stuff like VMware as well as our Microsoft environment. NSX initially for us was a play in the microsegmentation space, but we've recently started to move into it for app availability. We have an on-premise mail gateway that serves certain of our, I'd say, less up-to-date hardware systems that exist on our campus. We are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week shop. Students and faculty, for that matter, can kind of work whenever they want and to some extent wherever they want. And we're actually looking in the future to move to use NSX availability for between our DR site and also eventually to the cloud, primarily for app availability, and again, not having to wait for that re-IPing and stuff like that.
Great.
My name is Misha Vizmensky. I'm with Exponent HR. We are a SaaS provider. We build from the ground up a human resource information system that helps company manage their payroll, benefits, self-management, things of that nature. We're a fairly small company on employee side of things, about 140 employees. However, our product serves roughly 300,000 users on the payroll side, so application has to be highly available at all the time. Up to about a few months ago, we only had one co-location facility where we serve production tier, and then the rest of it was served from our building, which we build ourselves in about 16 miles outside of the main colo facility. And throughout the years, every kind of a second tier application that used to be back-end became pretty much a production tier 2. And from a SaaS platform, is just we have that same restricted data that our customer use on the front end. We have to replicate, create other environments for the same customers to test various scenarios from their payroll and benefit system. So it presented a lot of challenges from application development and product availability. How do you get to that next level? And we entertained the idea of NSX for last probably 3 years, but it never really clicked for me up until probably last year. After last VMworld, I thought, okay, I think this product is finally ready. And so we kind of started engaging VMware team with the local partners and start analyzing and how we can roll this product out. And then finally executed in May. And so we rolled the project out in June, and with expected timeline completion about 8 weeks, but it ended up to be 12 weeks with just a few surprises that were even identified by VMware as well as the integrator. So, and the main goal was to do pretty much all 3 things, including microsegmentation from security, application high availability, and ability to run from both data centers. And idea is to actually spin off the new co-location facility with a kind of greenfield rollout, so to speak. And then by doing that, we completely eliminated our office as a data center facility altogether, and now become sort of like a branch office. We only have one office. And now we have 2 data centers that are fully highly available, and so looks great. Money well spent, so.
That's all I want to hear. No, just kidding. So you guys actually already touched on what I was going to ask next, but maybe you want to add more color. Because there are these different projects that NSX can help with, it's always interesting to see where a given environment will start. You know, often it's starting with microsegmentation, but in some cases it is disaster recovery planning that kind of what kicked it all off. So I don't know, like Matt, I think you had mentioned for UNH it was more like starting with microsegmentation, now using that to extend to other sites.
Yep.
Do you want to start with just, I guess, confirming, giving
sure.
more color from each of you guys, and what was really the driving thing from the beginning?
The driving thing for us to start was definitely microsegmentation. I think we're like every other customer in that sense, where you see the initial pitch and then you start to think about it and you're like, okay, that's what I need to do first. Mm-hmm. The next piece for us, though, we started to look into stuff. So we use NSX load balancing for our on-premises mail gateway right now, and it's purely for availability and functionality there. And then we're also, like I said, we're looking to do it for app availability and for DR, because right now we just use replication to our DR site. We have another site at a partner institution within the state, but we're really looking to keep like our authentication services always available. We have 50 plus SaaS apps now, so our on-prem authentication is just becoming more and more important to us. And any type of downtime is just either lost productivity, but then you get I couldn't submit my homework, I couldn't do all this stuff. So yeah, it's always got to be available in order to keep our business running.
Keep the students accountable.
That's right. It's important. Job one.
Yeah. Cool. And Misha, it sounded like for you guys it was kind of across the board, and
Yeah, so I think if you want to take like a deeper dive at why we went with NSX, it kind of have to go look at the history of a company. So again, like I've said, we've been doing this for quite some time. We started building this application back in 2001, but it took about 6 years for a very small team to really come up with a concept that was really market ready, so to speak. And then we started selling the product somewhere in the year 2005 with a very limited customer base. And then kind of a big growth started in 2007. So the NSX was always, for us, was combined with that second data center, okay? So in the past, using the primary data center at the tier 1 level and using the our office as a back office, I could never justify the NSX cost or even functionality because we could do a lot of things without necessarily needing to migrate VMs, without changing IPs. There was really no business requirement, so to speak. But now, when they decided, finally we were, as a company, ready to spin off a second co-location facility so our customers can now feel comfortable that we're not located 16 miles from one site to another one, we're from Dallas. So we decided to pick on Austin as a facility. About 30% of our customers based in Texas anyway, and the rest of it is kind of nationwide. And so NSX was a very logical choice for a number of reasons. Again, my team is extremely small, so I have 2 full-time engineers, including myself, on a kind of a network infrastructure side of things. And the rest of the company is really pretty much a development, people who specialize mainly in the kind of a SQL stuff. We're a very heavy SQL shop. Again, being in the HR business, that's all about data that our customers use to perform their HR functions. So when we start looking at data center design, it really made a lot of sense with a smaller team without really hiring additional resources on the networking side of things, additional storage, is by spending that money on technology, it allows us to eliminate that expansion of the workforce and manage that entire infrastructure so we can stay small and agile. And NSX offers that a lot of automation and simplicity, and it really is that simple. So, I don't know, that's...
Cool, yeah, thank you. And Morgan, what was like the first thing that kind of kicked it off for you?
So it was a little bit of a dice throw in terms of where we started. So the sales pitch for us was a little bit tough. So law firms are private companies essentially. So when you're spending money, you're literally spending money out of the attorney's wallets. So you have to justify pretty strongly what it is you're spending your money on and why. And so when we talk about, security is a really big deal, especially in law firms in the past, 18 months or so. So that got their attention. And then when we started talking about using it for DR, then they started wilting a little bit and going, we don't like spending money on an insurance policy that we may never need, which is valid. So we struck on this idea of, well, what if we could start using all that money that we spent on our DR infrastructure, all that hardware, all that storage, all that stuff that we have out there, and start bringing it to bear in an elastic manner, maybe to help, when we have big analytics jobs that need to be run or processed, or to reduce impact if we have these maintenance windows so that we can actually stay up to breast on our security updates and patches on our hardware and things of that nature. So that's really where we decided to start, just based on when you're trying to explain technical things to non-technical people, you need something that's really kind of an aha moment. Well, when you can say, hey, look, this machine is in Arizona right now, and 5 minutes ago it was in San Diego, that gets their attention. Mm-hmm. Stuff like, oh yeah, this guy can't talk to this guy on the network doesn't really fly when you're talking to non-technical individuals. So we decided to start with that tack.
Cool, makes sense. So I guess just getting into now, things are running, or, for I think each of you guys are in different paths for how long NSX has been running, but whether it's something that was in practice already for a while, or how you're looking things to be in practice moving forward, how does DR change? Is it a different set of procedures? Is it the same set of procedures, different tools? Is it a shorter outage window, or what? Or even different people working on how you recover, or maybe there's no change. How does that change for each of you guys?
I think for us anyway, as we look forward with NSX, it's definitely transitioning from using our second facilities to more as another active site, and transitioning from DR to more of a business continuity type thing, and making sure that downtime doesn't require more than one team, just requires somebody on the VMware team. We've put a solid effort behind making sure the majority of the VMware folks are comfortable with NSX. Effectively, after our networking team makes the connectivity to the outside world available to us, it's kind of on us to do the rest of it, and that's given us a lot of freedom. So like initially before, if we were doing like early app delivery or something like that, you'd be talking a few weeks to deliver a new service of some kind, and now we're down to, as long as it doesn't have anything crazy or extra fancy, you're talking a few days now for us.
Yeah, I think for us, DR is like part of this project and NSX in general. It's complete restructuring of DR. So DR is going to completely change. We had kind of a best effort style of runbook for how we were going to have to do DR before, and now it's whole hog. We're doing NSX with SRM and like fully testable runbooks that we can validate ahead of time and say, look, not only have we proven that we can run it over here, we have done so. We did it last week, or however that plays out. So I think that's going to be a huge transformation and a big win for us, because we've identified for a long time that DR is a weakness as an IT organization.
It's interesting to see just where folks are at how important DR even is. Sometimes I'll talk to a customer and they'll say, we don't really have a good disaster recovery plan. And then sometimes I'll talk to someone who will like, oh yeah, we've nailed that down. We use Zerto or Site Recovery Manager. And it's I think it's just something that in general is becoming more and more top of mind, and then how you accomplish it is a whole other thing. Are there, actually on that note of, we're talking about the networking and security side of things, but then there's the compute. There's tools out there like Zerto and like Site Recovery Manager that keep your backup VMs ready to go. Are there tools you guys are leveraging on that end?
Yeah, so we're a Veeam customer, so we use Veeam for our backups, but we're also a Nimble customer, and we put that partnership to work. So for us, it's pretty great. We use Veeam to coordinate and orchestrate the backups, but then they leverage the Nimble replication to get our data to the other side, and we actually perform all of our actual backups on our DR site. So all of that, disk I/O, all of that, we still use tape, so all of that time spinning to tape all happens in Arizona, where as far as our production VMs are concerned, they only had to suffer a snapshot for a couple of minutes, and then they consolidated and moved on with life. So that's great, and we're pretty excited about that, because when you see 800 megabytes a second of backup throughput, you're pretty excited when it's not impacting your production network.
Yeah, I'd say for us, we're a Veeam shop as well. So don't really use SRM too much. It's primarily vSphere replication. We are spoiled in that we have a fiber connection to our external site. It's one of the benefits of being a public higher ed in the app space. So we don't have to go to some of the ultra fancy stuff sometimes.
That helps.
Yeah, from a DR point of view, we've been an early adopter of Rubrik as a backup company. So if you're not familiar with them, I strongly recommend you to look at that. And so we kind of evaluated Veeam before we went to Rubrik and kind of migrated from EMC Avamar platform. But for the first time ever, Rubrik always been probably one of the best backup systems I've ever used. And the main thing is just the restore process is really what usually speaks to the backup appliances. And most companies can really back up stuff efficiently, but restoring is a different story. And so Rubrik shines so well in a restore process. So for us, DR has been always kind of, even with the previous kind of a data center design, a fully functioning solution. So we have two Rubrik appliances with a full cross-site replication. And for a disaster recovery that we do quarterly exercises, and again, our application is very complex, but the particular tier that we do for the clients facing data, we do quarterly restores in the Rubrik world, and so we can sandbox all the VMs, bring it up online, and test full application functionality. And so we document the process and share with our customers who are concerned about the DR. So one of the things that excites us about in our new design from the two data centers, that now with we can, in the current setup, we have only one universal distributed switch, but we can now replicate that, basically duplicate it, and now we can spin off that Rubrik appliances basically in parallel, in conjunction with the live machines without changing any IPs. And by doing it, all we need to prevent them just simply talking outside of that sandbox. But it will actually running at both data centers at the same time exactly like your live environment is. So it's a huge lift in the DR and the business continuity for companies. But, so.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see that
That's
variety.
great. Yes.
And no, you don't need like VMware's SRM solution, whatever. You can choose whatever one that makes sense for you. Rubrik, Veeam, two great sponsors of this event. I noticed I keep running into their logo, so I'm like hearing them again. Yeah, so actually that kind of reminds me. We've got a pretty small, intimate group here. I'll ask a few more questions just to get kind of all the ideas out there. But one of the feedbacks we got in the past was panels like this, we want to make more conversational. So we do have a microphone. So after maybe a couple more questions, we'll move to Q&A and just create more of a discussion. I mean, the real value, I think, out of these sessions is just sharing stories of how did that work for you? How did that work for you? What are some challenges you had? Oh, I had that challenge too. Or this is how I got around it. And actually with that, so maybe that's another good question, where just in terms of looking at NSX across the board, as well as for application continuity, were there surprises? Maybe good surprises, challenging surprises that you didn't expect? Like, hey, that's cool that I can do that now, I didn't know that. Or, oh, hey, now I have to deal with this thing, how do I do that? Challenges, good things, either way.
So our networking team, when we first brought NSX in, they were, I think, hesitant is a good word. So our official debarkation point is as soon as the wire enters the data center, it's our team, just the VMware team's responsibility. And while I knew I would have to become familiar with firewall rules and stuff like that, it really forced us to come up to speed really quick. And it's a completely new concept. If you think back to like when you started using ESX, or if you started using like vSAN or something like that, you had to slightly rethink the way you were doing it before, and I think NSX is no different in that sense. It does require you to become more familiar with networking than, obviously you had an idea of it before because you're doing, distributed switches and vSwitches and all that stuff, but this really forces you to step up to the next level.
Right.
Yeah, I think when we start talking about our surprises, a couple good things, both before the project, which helped us out, right? The VRNI, the vRealize Network Insight was a huge eye-opener for us when we got the proof of concept, or the POC environment set up, and we started looking at, well, here's what's really going on in your network, and we're like, oh wow, look at all that, that really helps illuminate, and we're like, hey, regardless of whether or not we buy NSX or buying VRNI, that was kind of our posture, even, as soon as we saw that, we're like, you're not taking it out of our network. So that was really nice, because it gives us really good insight. And then the second piece of that is we used are using the VMware Rapid Deploy for NSX, right, which is a professional services team of deployment. And through the workshop process where, they sat the VMware team, which is me, and the network engineer, we share a lot of hats, but, we sat in the same room together and we're looking at the same bad news, and highlighting some of the stuff that we would have faced regardless of NSX, right, when it comes to a DR, and what happens if we really need to use our DR side in anger, like here's all these routing things, these legacy things that we inherited, that static routes here and there that are going to have to be dealt with. Now we're going to deal with them ahead of time, but there's a whole lot of heartburn and some finger pointing coming out of that. So it's a challenge politically, which I think is kind of a common thread with NSX, right? There's a lot of internal discussion that has to happen, and things of that nature.
I'll actually quick plug VRNI as well. So we were a rather early customer with NSX, so we didn't have VRNI when we started. So we got down the road, we got microsegmentation operational, and then we're like, okay, new workloads go right into NSX. There's almost no debate there. Then we started looking at how do I transition a workload in? And so you can read the the spec sheet on whatever app it is you're hosting, and it says, yeah, I need these 5 ports or whatever. But then we got VRNI, and it's like, no, it's really more than those 5 ports. So you make that initial migration over into for us as an NSX cluster, and whoops, something doesn't work. So yeah, VRNI, huge piece for us, huge piece.
Yeah, for us, the challenging piece was more from a deployment point of view when we still roll out the product. We spent quite a bit of time preparing and kind of remeasuring every aspect of the network. We replaced a number of gear, so we upgraded our F5 appliances to support GTM functionality. We replaced our Cisco firewall with Palo Alto with an anticipation to start leveraging Panorama to help us to have a better insight, like at that layer 7, to see the traffic inside NSX, and if we can put additional, leverage Palo Alto's knowledge of, if there's something is abnormal based on your network traffic. So all those things put together, it's not just an NSX project as a single line item, I'm going to roll it out. We have to look at the entire stack from A to Z to make sure that when we ever spend that money is that it's actually utilized at full capacity, not in a particular silo environment. We pretty much put it on our entire infrastructure. And so we're not necessarily a big shop from a VMware point of view. I mean, we only run now 16 hosts and kind of 8 hosts at each site, and it's a next generation of the Dell servers, like 620s. And running at that new processor speed, it allowed us basically consolidate our entire 300 VMs that we run, and we can run it on 8 servers now, what we in the past could not do on previous generation of 830. So that was very important for us. And another piece that our integrators, and including even VMware, and, I know it's a dirty laundry, they had a hard time looking at our Cisco switch gears to make sure that the proper MTU requirements were met at every level. So for example, for us, when we look at the specs, everybody says, yeah, this gear is fully ready for you to go to support the jumbo frames MTU at 1600. But when we start rolling out the product, all of a sudden it didn't work. And everybody started like, why is it not working? And then they realized that they didn't support at the port level. So even though the switch said, yeah, it works fine, but once you look at the port level that required for NSX functionality, it didn't meet the requirements. So we had to quickly regroup. So just, a piece of advice, I say, spend a lot of time looking at the prep work. And as a matter of fact, I just saw on your site, you have a great document now. There's like a white paper, about 160 pages of how to roll out NSX in a cross-site VC configuration. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if somebody looking for some good read, don't fall asleep though. But it points, it really gives a great overview, very detailed of what we're talking here. And if you spend time going through it, I think you can really simplify your rollout process and sell it to whoever you want to sell inside the organization.
Yeah, that is definitely a great resource. We have a full-time person on the team dedicated to, looking at any new challenges that come in those designs and updating those designs when you're looking at multi-site. His name actually is Umair Ahmed, Ahmed. So if you look in your app, you'll see like some multi-site deep dives with him, if that's a topic of interest for you. So I guess just a couple more before we turn to Q&A. Actually, again, I think you guys kind of touched on it because we're kind of, everything's so interrelated. But in how ownership, I guess, changes of the network, or if it doesn't change. Like for example, Morgan, you talked about collaborating with the network engineer at the rapid deploy. And in Matt's case, it's kind of a more ongoing journey with the network team and how that works. And Misha, I think it sounds like it's a more smaller, consolidated team, like just completely different environments. It's always interesting to hear how that works. This morning I was in an EBC upstairs, one of the executive briefings, where an organization's server VI team had brought their network team. They were kind of bought on NSX, but this network team did want to come, did want to learn more, but had a lot of questions, and so we just went through that. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's like, oh, we're kind of do this on our own. I don't know if you guys see, if you see that, if there's more color in how that relationship's evolving in terms of just silos between departments, or if it's kind of just, or if you see it changing even in the future.
Yeah, I think for us, as we go down the road, our networking team becomes more and more comfortable with NSX. We're definitely seeing that with our planned build out for our DR site. And I think it's frankly, it's just improving. I will say initially for us, the VMware folks, we were able to sell leadership on the concept of NSX, and that went really well. In terms of selling our network team, our implementation partner was actually really big on that front for us. So, if you can, get a partner, and if you can, ask them to help you.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That's a good tip.
So we're a small team, so we already kind of overlap, and butt heads on a regular basis anyway, regardless of, whether we're talking about an NSX or something else.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things that I think, we're talking about, them learning is there's a saturation point, right? Where if you have someone who's kind of dedicated to networking and the networking gear and keeping that up to date, and they're kind of chasing security and all of that they do, you really need them to start logging into VMware every day and start looking at that every day to get the stick time, if you will, of driving that airplane and making sure that they're comfortable with it. And that's, I think, where we're going to have probably the biggest challenges, because he is very relieved in my instance, that the overlay doesn't have to touch the underlay very much. Once you get it in place, and that initial shakeup is over, pretty much it's just going to be seeing whatever routes NSX feeds it, and then pushing traffic back down to it, and very little is going to change on the underlay from that day forward. And he's excited about the lack of reliance on brand loyalty, if you will, right? The fact that we can take out expensive Brocade switches and replace them with a lesser expensive but high bandwidth, simpler layer 2 switch if we wanted to, or anything like that. So there's a mixed bag, I think, that we're seeing, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But we encourage, right? We bought all the training for everyone to be able to consume. We just need them to consume it.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Anything to add, Misha?
Yeah, in our case, we never had a network team, so we do very little network. And once the stack is built and designed, you really don't do a lot of maintenance. I mean, just basic kind of OS upgrades if something comes up. And in the Cisco world, every Cisco tell us just don't do anything if you don't need it, right? So for us, actually having NSX actually takes that network into the next level. So being a small shop where we manage the entire Microsoft stack, now a VMware stack, and now we have this network stack, all in one single pane. So it's actually expanding the knowledge base of my team, but without over complexity if you were to go to a traditional networking. So, and if we need them extra depth and knowledge, our partner is available to ping them on, if something comes up. But otherwise, it's just really easy if you committed to VMware. I think it's just a very natural progression. And everything I've seen here, from a app defense module we just talked about, it just excites me even more now. Start looking at something like this in the future, which is just totally a great follow-up once you get the microsegmentation working, and with Apollo using Panorama, so you have multiple security defenses and a lot more insight and visibility inside your application. Like looking today at the new product that they show at the session Workfront. Yeah, so it shows you, what process it runs and what, where you have them application level, bottlenecks, for example. So something like that. We're going to start looking at those functions as well.
Cool. All right, last one before we get to Q&A. Even VMware aside, cloud. How are you guys looking at cloud, leveraging cloud or not? Misha, you guys are actually kind of your own cloud in your case. But if you guys could each just touch on how you're using or not using it today, or maybe folks in your organization, whether you like it or not, are using cloud, or maybe they're not, and what that picture looks like today and how you see it changing in the future, if at all.
So our individual departments at the university are very big fans of identifying a need that they have internally, and then 9 times out of 10 just purchasing a SaaS product to fill whatever need that is, and then approaching us about it often after the fact. So SaaS is a growing space for us, and then we're also looking into the cloud for infrastructure. And primarily for us, it's an app availability thing. We have a lot of depth in our DR site. Fairly comfortable in having to run a workload there if we need to. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for, at the cloud, from an infrastructure standpoint anyway, for more of an availability. Because we, frankly, cannot deal with downtime. Mm-hmm. The second something goes down, the email unavailable or whatever. Yeah, it's a pretty immediate response given our user base. Mm-hmm. Sure. They're very sensitive.
Yeah, so clouds have always been an interesting story for us. On one hand, the partners really don't like the cloud professionally. They love it personally. They use it all over the place. They live and breathe and stuff in the cloud. But when it comes to our data being in the cloud, there's an extreme lack of trust. really what it comes down to. You know, if we get a court order to destroy this data, how can we guarantee that Amazon is actually destroying that data and that it's actually gone? And you know, that whole process of chain of custody with data is really challenging for us. So there's that. But on the other hand, we're also starting to use it for our document management with NetDocs as a cloud resource for us. So, you know, the mixed signals, we're a Rackspace customer for our web presence,
Okay.
right? So we do a little bit of both. I think in terms of us using cloud in the context that we kind of hear about it here the most, I don't think it's very likely due to the size of the data that we have and how expensive that would get for us really quickly. I am interested in, after we have NSX fully deployed and we can really say, hey, look how easy this is, the elastic model for DR really makes sense for us, because then we can say, you no longer have to, or I'm no longer going to ask you for all this money for hardware for our DR site. I'm rather going to say, let's keep the lights on, and then we'll keep a replicated set of data somewhere, and then if we ever need it, we have that ability, and then you'll just hit with a nasty bill 1 month, but that's because something really bad happened. So, you know.
Right. You only paid for it when you had to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think that's the direction we're going to try to go. Whether or not we get there is, we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I actually have a demo of that exact scenario in my intro session, which shameless plug. Cool. So with that, as a Kickstarter for questions, again, as I mentioned earlier, we just want to encourage back and forth conversation from folks who are looking at NSX to folks who have maybe deployed at NSX, which actually may be some of you guys, so feel free to come up, share your stories, ask a question. We have some NSX goodies for the first 3 folks who have some question or even a comment or an experience to share. There's like a t-shirt, water bottle, and some other, actually a network virtualization dummies guide book in there. Any questions on anything we've talked about today? Disaster recovery plans, application continuity, cloud plans? Yeah, please. Actually, so we have a microphone right up in the front, if you don't mind, so we can actually hear the question.
Actually, I would like to know, I'm starting microsegmentation, and I would like to know, with the higher ed, I would like to know what are some of the downfall or creating policies, security groups, you know, starting the right way, what you guys did.
If you want to start the right way and you can do it today, I would say use VRNI to start.
We purchased that, but we are questioning how to create those security groups. Do you create for app base, or do you create one general?
So for us, it's for the most part, it tends to be app based, with the exception of basic stuff like web. So we have a lot of apps that just need 80 and 443. Those are that's their own policy group. You slap the 8443 tag on it, whatever, you're good to go. But we also have a lot of edge, I don't want to say edge case apps. We're higher ed. We have whatever. So, but we have one like an ArcGIS server, which it's geolocation mapping and stuff like that, and it uses a very particular set of ports. So that one, those types of apps, they get built out as their own. So it's like a per app security group at that point, and that was most useful for me anyway.
And what do you use? Do you use the naming or tagging? How do you?
So we use policy groups, and then you can assign a tag to a policy group, and then we just tag the VMs with those tags. So I found tagging to be relatively easy, and then if I need to do it again, especially with the web type stuff, it's much easier to replicate than going in and manually adding somebody to a policy group or something like that.
So you have your own tagging scheme that makes sense for you?
Yep.
For your app? Yeah.
Yep,
okay.
definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good question, thanks.
Oh, good. Don't forget your swag. Grab swag.
Just to feed off of the tagging one, how did y'all go about starting your tagging? Because from my understanding, you got to have, a host has to be tagged in order for the access policy to work. They have the tagging has to be there in order for the host to communicate to each other. They're going to be tagged. How did y'all kick that off and start it? And who led it? Was it more from a security perspective? Because I've always, from my understanding, security needs to drive it with input from the application team and possibly the network team, but it's more going to be security focused.
We're very fortunate in the sense, I'll say this is fortunate and disfortunate. The VMware team is also service owners for probably like 15 or 16 applications at the university. So we have, we don't have to necessarily go to the security team for that type of stuff. So we're already familiar with what type of tags or grouping or whatever needs to be made. We also have a pretty decent working relationship with our security team. So it was more collaborative. I'll tell you, there was a lot of back and forth. We redid a few things more than once, just because it's okay, we built this for one application, running great, whatever, no problem. You go to onboard the next application, maybe that didn't play out so well the second time, so a little re-architecting never hurt.
So you find it very simple to come back and re-architect after it's been deployed into production?
Yeah, as long as you don't have to do like I said, applying a tag to a security policy and then applying the tag to the VM. We don't tend to have apps that are hundreds of VMs in size. I think our biggest one is like 9 or 10. So it's not a big deal for one of us to go back through and change it. And we know which one they are. So it's not a big deal for us to go back and change it on 9 or 10 apps. But most of our things are like 2 or 3 tops.
One more question. One of y'all were talking about deploying layer 7 virtuals, the Palo Altos in your environment. We are in the process of deploying a very large environment. We're a total of 80 ESX hosts, 32 in one data center, 32 in another, and then 16 in another. And it's not very cost effective. People are sticker shocked when they realize when we have to go out, Palo charges by host, and so we're kind of we're being put in a box where we're having to determine what cluster is going to host what type of guest on it, so we don't have to go out and purchase so many layer 7 virtual firewalls. Did y'all see that problem, or?
No, we haven't got to that point, so we're not necessarily buying a virtual firewall, we just have our physical. And the idea is just to simply add a panorama, which is just a single virtual machine, to have a deeper view inside the NSX firewall, the native firewall. So it's just I think we're going to help us with the management. So it's still on the list, we haven't got to that point. We're slightly on a smaller scale, but anytime I look at the price tag, you have to, it's almost like you mentioned insurance, right? You have to evaluate what are you trying to achieve. If somebody is shocked about the price, you simply say that what are you giving up? So I mean, it's always, nothing comes free, so to speak, right? So.
Okay. So right now you're hairpinning it to a physical firewall and then coming back in?
Yes. Well, in the panorama world, it's yes. If you have to leave NSX, then yes. But so it's kind of an east-west versus north-south traffic. And again, what are you trying to protect and what is your security concern? So for example, for us initially right now, east-west traffic is not a high priority because we know how our application works and we know what the holes are. So we're kind of accepting the risk currently, right? So we fully secured kind of north-south traffic and feel very confident in what we have put in place. So, but the next step is again, so now microsegmentation is going to allow us to secure that east-west traffic, so we have more exposure of how the servers communicate on which ports, and because developers, when they develop an application, they don't pay attention to how, what kind of traffic they're pushing back and forth. So we're hoping that, again, we're in the early stages of microsegmentation, and we're going to run that Vernie be realized. So we're going to see what's happening behind the scene and then tie up any purchase from a Apollo point of view to our findings. So that's just work in progress.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's good.
Don't forget your swag too.
Yeah. If you want it.
Yes, one question regarding the kind of profile of the partner that you choose to do the initial deployment. For those of you that work with a partner, I was thinking more about the profile because maybe it was an expert of networking or security or continuity. So, and the point is, once you choose the partner, if you saw any lack of capabilities that you identified because it was a new technology.
From my point of view, so for us is the driving came really from VMware. So the partner was really recommended by VMware because NSX is still new to even VMware, and they don't have a very big customer base. So it was really done 50-50, so to speak. So they had engineers from VMware. In our case, they were sort of speaks free from the VMware side of you because we did pay the partner. So the partner came in highly recommended that they've done a number of NSX deployment already in the country. So I felt a lot more confident in the rollout. And again, that particular partner had really demonstrated their depth and knowledge of my entire project. Again, like I said, building a second co-location facility and how the application is going to migrate and live in 2 sites. So they were able to demonstrate the knowledge and understanding of my problem and how they can quickly solve it for us. So we not necessarily used them a lot during the process because my team, we're very knowledgeable, we learned very quickly, so we did a lot of work ourselves that they initially planned on doing for us. So we saved tons of money on their professional services, but their knowledge, allow us to shorten that kind of a learning gap or R&D gap that you would otherwise, if you do it on your own, you probably could do it. I think anybody can do it, but your time to market is going to be a lot longer. So I think just to make sure you work with the right VMware resources first to identify the right partner versus another way around, because we had a couple other partners who said, yeah, we can do it, but once I started interviewing them, I knew immediately they were lying. So, so they didn't have any knowledge.
Yeah,
So.
I'd be happy to connect with you after, like you said, each partner in learning this is kind of on their own point in the journey, and we can help maybe provide guidance and connect you with some good resources.
Thank you very much.
Great, good discussions. Any other questions for our panel here? Going once.
The silence is deafening.
Going twice. Cool. Well, thanks for the questions we did get, and thanks very much to our panel for sharing your stories and your experience with the folks who came here today. This will be recorded if you want to check back on it. And enjoy the rest of your VMworld.